Here we go. Okay, hello everybody. So I took the learning with and learning from reciprocity in the service learning in service learning and teacher education article. And this article is really awesome and it talks about how service learning should benefit the person that's being served and also the server. And so it took a really unique perspective on that. And I found that to be very interesting. And so I'm going to scroll down here. At the beginning of the article, it was posing the question posing the idea of how students will oftentimes go to nursing homes or go to different places to visit the elderly and have discussions. And so, specifically in this article, they were talking about how it says when students interview elderly residents in a nursing home about their experiences in World War II, they gain eyewitness historical information and provide company to persons who otherwise may have few visitors. And so, it's supposed to be a win win situation. And so it was very cool and interesting to think about that because growing up, I was in high school, I was in the National Honor Society and we had to do service. So I oftentimes went to nursing homes and did this, or I went to the homeless shelter and, talked to people and learned about their stories. And while maybe in my high schooler brain, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm doing a good deed, I didn't realize how much I had learned from benefiting others, maybe serving them soup and listening to their stories. It kind of gave the server or the person you were serving a voice. And it just is interesting how you can learn from them. And so in this article, and in this study, they took pre service teachers and high school students and paired them together. And they learned from each other and tried to see if they had a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering if Dr. Hill Jackson and Stuart, if y'all had any experiences, growing up doing service at all that made you think about this.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like over the last few years, with the exception of the last 2 years with COVID, I volunteer time with working with students, middle school students in Houston, and doing some tutoring in the areas of math and science and language arts. And I've always looked at it as you said, Hannah, as kind of like, I'm giving this service. And I did not think about perhaps what it is that the students were gaining. Now we know they're gaining something because
Right.
hopefully their skill set will have improved. And I'm wondering now, and I think the authors of this article do a great job in terms of they bring about the issue of the power differential. So
Yes.
even though when you go into these relationships and we think that you're going to give as much as you get, there is this realization where we need to have this realization that that power dynamic isn't always equal, that somebody might be the winner in that relationship. And so when I think about it, I'm wondering if I went into that situation honoring the voices of my middle schoolers. Did I give them a chance to share their voice, their perspective, things they probably would have changed or needed? And when I'm being honest with myself, I think that I have failed my students.
Yes.
Anything? Yeah. Anything from you?
Oh,
Okay. No worries. So I totally agree. I totally agree that sometimes there is a power imbalance, and that's what it discusses in the article. And so I really liked what it said. I really liked this introduction. It was really it made me think and it made me reflect on my own experiences. And it also talked about how when we're building our resumes as students and we put service opportunities, we put, oh, I served with the homeless shelter, I served with this, but we don't necessarily put times that we were being served. And so that also could be considered a service opportunity because if we try to, think about how it's a mutually beneficial relationship, then we can see that, okay, I was tutored, in calculus, and so maybe that was something where I learned from that person, but they might have also learned something from me and how they can better help other students who are
Mhm.
like more like me. And so I found that to be very interesting, and I really liked how this made me think.
And
um,
let's connect it to our specific example of the Cancun trip. So we
yes.
spent all that time, gathering supplies and books, and we were servers. And I actually heard, a few of our colleagues say, the word help a lot. Do you feel when you think about our exchanges with the students and the families and the teachers, do you feel as if they felt as if their voices were affirmed in that process? What do you think they would say?
I think they would. I think that they did feel affirmed, especially because of the emotion that the principal was sharing. She was so grateful, and she was just so happy that we were there and that we were able to take our time to come and be with them. She seemed very honored that we were able to do that, and so I think that she was affirmed. And I sometimes on service trips, it can feel a little awkward because you don't want to be just like, oh, I'm coming here to help you. We just wanted to get to know the students and just see what it's like to be there in Mexico from their perspective, so that we could better help our students in the US. And so I do think that it was a different experience than I had had before, and so it was very good. And I think that we learned a lot, and that they got to benefit from the books and the tools that we were able to bring to them.
Yeah. And let's also think about how we could have improved that experience. Because even though we were gracious and they were gracious to us, even though we could say that we provided affirmation, there was still a power differential. We came for only 90 minutes, let's
Yes,
say, and we gave them books and supplies. How could we have improved that power imbalance?
absolutely. So I was a little sad that we only were able to spend 90 minutes there. And I think that what could have improved our experience is if maybe we could have spent, I don't know, several hours, maybe a whole school day, so that we could get to know the students, or even a longer term trip, doing service learning for a longer term, so that we're able to get to know the students. We're able to maybe help them organize everything and come up with ideas and just get to know them on a personal level, rather than just like coming in, here's a gift, and then leaving. And
Yeah.
so I think that something from other service trips that I have taken that I have really enjoyed is one time I did a similar type trip to Mexico, and we stayed for a week and we saw the same kids every day that we
Yeah.
were there. And so we were able to build that relationship and become more personal with them, rather than just having the power difference of, oh, we're the Americans, we're going to come in and give you a gift and then leave. And so I
Mhm,
think if we
mhm.
had our time had been extended, we were able to get to know them better, then it would have been a better experience as well.
Yes, we have to really do an inventory, an honest inventory of what occurred, and it was really just the circumstances we were presented with. We found out about this opportunity last minute, but in order to really have um, parity in that experience in terms of power, we really needed to have not just affirmed their voice but included their voice.
Yes.
We needed to probably have some surveys of what they needed before we
This
went,
service for sure.
right? We probably need to have conversations with the families and the administrators. And I know that our IQ colleagues, they did that. They had those conversations. As a matter of fact, Dr. Hancock, he actually made 3 trips there before we went there because he wanted to get to know them. We could have had, if there were no issues with technology, Skype meetings. We could have stayed there longer. We could have asked the parents to give us presentations to acknowledge and affirm the knowledge that they have. I mean,
Yes.
if you really want to know about the learners and the community members, ask them. And we didn't have time for any of that. So we have to be very clear that there was a huge power differential in what
Yes.
happened. We came to give, and though they blessed our hearts and maybe, made us feel good about what we gave, the reality is that their voices were not really honored in this
Hmm.
process from us. And that's just was the situation. And so it's a reminder that if we're going to do this long term, we have to invest the time in the relationship building before,
Yes.
during, and even after.
Oh,
You know, I was
absolutely.
really, I was really taken by the fact that Stuart said, he wanted to connect with the young woman who had done the anime drawing, for him. That's showing that,
Yeah,
I
the
still
girl.
want to,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
thinking, is that possible? To build
yes, and we're,
a kind
yes,
of a pen pal relationship with.
yes, and so we, because we're talking about someone underage, what we can do is facilitate a message from you to her administrator, right? So we're happy to do that, Stuart, through Dr. Ramirez connecting with the principal on the ground, so we can facilitate that. So true power balance comes from relationships. So
Absolutely.
it's an investment in time before you get there. It's an investment in time while you are there, which we did not have. And it's an investment after. So when it comes to reciprocity, it just wasn't there, but it could be the start of a relationship to come. And that's what I was hoping. The principal wanted us to come back. And so I would love to take another group and start building that relationship, if we can. Okay.
Absolutely. I think that even to apply this into our classrooms is follow up. Follow up is so important. If you have a student come to you, with an issue or something, and you just follow up with them once, I think it's important to continue to build that relationship. And so, even with service learning, as you were saying, that just reminded me of that and how important it is to prepare, but then and how important follow up is. And I feel like that's a huge
Mhm.
problem that I've noticed just in my community is that people don't follow up anymore, and so that's something that needs to be brought up.
And your families that you're going to be working with in the state of Texas, they're going to feel that power imbalance. There's a sense of authority that comes with being an educator. And if we're really going to connect with learners and support them, we have to try to lessen that differential as much as possible. So we have to remember that the relationship building happens before you even get to that class. You may even want to send a message to all your kiddos the summer before. Hey, I'm looking forward to meeting you. You want to send a message to those families. I'm looking forward to
Mm.
meeting you. Tell me a little bit, about your kiddo. Let's meet up via Zoom before the start of the year, and
And
keeping
maybe
that
do the
going.
home visit. Mhm.
Absolutely. Home visits are always encouraged as well. And so there's so much to take from this article in terms of what things we need to be aware of when it comes to power and balance, because often we feel like, oh, my voice, as an educator doesn't matter. Maybe my kiddos don't hear me, but there's authority that comes with our role. And it can get in the way of real relationships if we're not careful. Okay, Hannah, tell us a little bit more about the methodology of this study. How was it conducted?
Okay. So here, I'll scroll down so that we can see this. Let's make sure I Yes. So there were 23 pre service teachers in this study, and they were in a fifth year teacher education program. So I'm guessing that's like a 5+1 program to teach secondary school. And they were paired with high school students, 10th graders, and they would meet. They met one time by them, or they met one time as just a get to know you, and then they met several other times and observed teachers, and then they would discuss what they had learned from that experience, and they just were able to get to know each other on a level that was different from teacher to teacher rather and different from student to teacher. So it was very interesting to hear and read what the article said about how the students learned from the teachers and the teachers learned from the students, and how it was just interesting to analyze the power dynamics of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so let's see what else I had taken away. So one of the things is that they, in the article at some point, they talked about there were two different types of relationships. They were two German words, and I'm not sure
Oh
if
yeah,
I will be pronouncing them
I
correctly,
can pronounce it. The
but one of
community and the
them
services.
was there was a Gemeinschaft, Gemeinschaft type of relationship, and that was the traditional relationship of just the people you meet and how you know become friends and you just continue to discuss. And then there was another type of relationship that was uh Gesellschaft,
Oh yeah, you're pretty good. So there was Gemeinschaft, a sense of
Gemeinschaft,
community, or Gesellschaft, a sense of
Gesellschaft. Okay,
society. Yes. Mhm.
yes, and so that was more of a public relationship. The way that I understood is that it was more of a kind of like a business relationship, maybe between coworkers, is how I would understand that. And so, how service learning was a mix in between of those, and it talked about how there was some misconceptions about that in service learning.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
just to clarify that a little bit, that sense of Gemeinschaft is something that is aspirational, that we would, it's the personal, it's
right.
getting to know someone in a way that you understand sort of insights about each other, as opposed to a Gesellschaft,
Yes,
which is a
Geisel.
kind of societal perspective. It's very informal, it's very impersonal, and it's almost like a business transaction. So, one of the things that happens when you're working in a service learning project is that we all aspire to have Gemeinschaft or community, but because of how things work, it always, well, many times ends up being Gesellschaft,
Right.
meaning being very, very impersonal and
Mhm.
very business-like in the transaction. So they went through this study with these 23 pairings, and the folks learned something. What were some of the things that were the big ideas from their interaction?
Yes, so one thing that I noticed is that the students learned about the child protective services and how the teachers are able to help them when they have trouble at home. And it seemed like, from what I observed, is that the students didn't really know that teachers. They kind of humanized the teachers to the students
Yeah.
because a lot of times students are like, oh, the teachers just teach all day at school. They don't have lives outside of school. And so they don't really care about us. And so I feel like through that, they were able to humanize the teacher, and they were able to understand that the teachers really do care about them. And so that was very interesting. As well as there was one quote, and I wrote it down on my paper, but I can't remember exactly where it was, but it discussed how the teachers didn't know that they could relate to the students as much as they thought. And
Mhm.
specifically, male teacher was discussing how he could relate to another student who liked NSYNC, I believe. And also, he said something like, "Oh, I can't remember exactly. I wrote it down, but basically, just talking about how they can relate to each other."
Yeah.
And so, and that was really cool because a lot of times that's something I'm really passionate about, is being able to relate to my students and helping them to know that, like, while I'm a teacher and they need to respect me, that I care about them on a deeper level. And
Mhm.
so that was just really cool to hear and to read about in this article as well.
Mm. Mhm.
And then another aspect was is the students realize that teaching is a lot harder than it seems. You don't just get up there and talk and then leave. And they realize that you put a lot of effort into what you're doing as a teacher.
Yeah.
And so that was really an awesome takeaway. And I wish my students understood how much work we put into this, because sometimes they just don't know. And so
Mhm.
they sometimes don't respect that. But through this project, it was really awesome to see that the students got to know the teachers a little better, and see what they go through and what happens. And then the teachers were able to get to know the students a little better and see
Yeah.
how you know what it looks like from a student perspective and see the different takeaways.
Would you say that part of the the connection they made was because they were so close in age. I mean, these were 5th-year students, and then these are high school students. I mean, there probably was like a difference between 5 to 8 years or so between these students, I'm imagining. Do you think that that's a part of it?
I absolutely do. And as I'm the age of, the 5th year teacher, and then my students that I teach are ninth graders.
Yep,
And
yep.
so I totally get that on a personal level, that my students feel more connected to me because I am a younger teacher. I've had students come to me. One of my students was, saying, "Oh, Miss Hart, you're so relatable and you're so kind and you're so much easier to talk to than the other older teachers." And so I think that has a lot to do with it. I would be interested to see this study done with a veteran teacher and
Yes,
a younger
yes.
student. I think it would be totally different. However, there was one pre-service teacher that discussed how she didn't feel like she really learned from the students, and so my assumption would be that more veteran teachers would feel that way,
Hmm.
because of just the huge age gap. But
Mhm.
maybe they could learn a lot. So that would be
Yeah,
an
yeah.
interesting question to pose.
Yes, absolutely. I imagine that if you're a veteran teacher, you have further to go to make those connections. I think that the older we are, the more sort of reverence students may have for us. And
Absolutely.
so that power differential gets bigger. So you can imagine if if the student was assigned to maybe your mentor teacher, who may be a more veteran teacher, that they may perceive that power differential to be bigger than what it is. Whether it is there or not, age can do something, right?
Hmm.
Age and wisdom can really have an impact on that power differential. So in the interest of time,
Yes.
tell us the big idea from this article. Was there reciprocity achieved? And how do you know
I
between these
think
two groups?
that reciprocity was achieved, because they were able to. The article discussed that they learned from each other. However, I think that with some of them it was not. So I think that it depended on you know, maybe it depended on the teacher and the pre-service teacher and who the student were. I think that it's possible that it could be achieved. um I have a loss of words, but it could be achieved if it was in a different situation, or maybe it could be achieved more if we had a different perspective. But I believe that it's kind of in the middle.
Yeah, yeah, some did and some did not. I was struck by one comment. I believe it was from one of the high school students, and it
Mhm.
comes from the article, and it was a student named Nick. So you don't know. The great thing about qualitative studies is because you can take inference from the words of the participants. And Nick was one of the participants in this study, and Nick said the following: "It feels like we are equals."
Yes,
So out of the mouth of the participant came like the big idea. So when
absolutely.
someone can actually verbalize that, A, I didn't feel respected, or B, I felt respected, or they can infer through a comment like this that there was reciprocity, right? So these folks were referring to each other as peers, as colleagues, and from the participants' own words came affirmation that
Absolutely.
reciprocity happened, at least for that particular participant. So there is the bigger idea for us to take out of this article, and that it reciprocity, while it may be, an ideal and maybe difficult to achieve, we have to always remember to strive for it. And when I
Absolutely.
think about, our experience in Cancun, it was a classic case that there was not reciprocity in that
Mhm.
process, but it could be an opportunity for future, right? Engagements and experiences for us to build upon if we are so inclined. All
Yes,
right.
ma'am. Exactly.
And we can end recording.
Okay.